Dusty,
Yes, sir.
we're back at the table again.
And you know why? Because we love to tell the stories.
Now, today, I got to confess, there are some of these interviews that we do, and I'll try to think about what questions I've always wanted to know. This one's a little different because this is the third probably on this list of people that are so close that I have to think more about what not to say.
I think that's pretty funny. And I'm probably just gonna sit here and watch the two of you like a ping pong match.
Now, for those who may not recognize his name,
Yep.
if you read credits, this is one of the busiest engineers in Nashville, and
one of the most loved.
Yes,
one of the most loved.
So we welcome today my good friend and your good friend, Justin Kropf.
Yeah, Justin.
And today, I don't know if it's today, but this week is a pretty significant week for you. What happened? What happened this week that you're marking?
Last week, I moved here. It's 30 years since I moved here.
30 years.
And he's worked at Daywind
for 30 years,
which is absolutely unbelievable in this industry.
So Justin is the house engineer, which means you're there every day.
Yes.
House engineer means you do all but live there.
Pretty much. Sometimes I feel like I lived here as well.
And so the house engineer means you have recorded just about everybody in the Southern Gospel at some point that has come through the Daywind studio.
Yes.
And when I asked you if you'd be willing to do this,
that's exactly right.
I think it was Tony Wood who started the interview by saying, "You know I don't trust you, right?"
And I will say yes, absolutely to that.
But we in those 30 years, that was not the beginning of our friendship. I've known you. I met you when you were probably 8 or 9 years old. Is that right?
Probably so. Yeah.
Wow.
It was your first trip, and I don't know if we get into this, but your trip with the Spears when they came out had probably the late
81.
Was it 81? Okay, yes, I would have been. I'll let the cat out of the bag. I would have been 9.
Oh my gosh!
So when you go out on the West Coast, Brock Spear had people in different places that he would call, and we need a date in this area.
He probably was on the same tour that they would come through Twin Falls, Idaho to the Nazarene Church, then to Caldwell to the Nazarene College, and then probably right up, because you're Burns or Bend or what?
Actually, I was further west in the Willamette Valley.
Okay.
But so they'd go up, probably go into Portland out of there, and then they would come down to our little neck of the woods.
Because I remember they were always
we went to the Nampa, Idaho church at the college there.
Yep.
So when I met, Dale, Justin's father, was the guy that Brock would call on the West Coast, out anywhere near the Portland, Oregon area. And Dale would find some place for Spears to sing, and then they would open up for us. So it was Dale and his wife, and they had these 2 little kids.
Well, actually, it was
That's right.
The first time y'all come, they had their group. It was my mom, dad, my uncle, my mom's brother, and another lady that they sung. And they started singing mid-South. I was trying to think. I was probably 6, so it would have been, mid-70s. And they sung together as a group. So the first 2 or 3 years y'all come out, it was with their group, Homeward Bound Quartet.
Wow.
But I met you 2 kids.
Yeah,
and you were up on the stage. I remember when we'd be setting up, just kind of watching.
Getting under everybody's feet.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, there's stories I'll just leave alone.
But, now, truth be told, that first trip out there, we didn't see you hardly at all. Because, as you do with groups, you go out to eat afterwards. Well, we went to the restaurant, and everybody come in. And it was, I remember it was the year that the sisters, I think, had gone back out.
Yeah, so I remember it well.
I'm sure you do. And so we go into the restaurant, and everybody came in except for you.
Because he's a prima donna.
Well, Dad said, "Where's the guitar player?" And Brock said, "No, now I understand it." But Brock said, "Well, he was
not feeling
well, and he was pining because he left his girlfriend or fiance at home." And that was the story that we got. Now, knowing now is the outgoing person that he is.
Yeah.
Probably.
they could have used any excuse. I didn't go in and eat with the groups. The only exception was if we did a late night truck stop and cathedrals were there, or where I'd get to hear stories.
Yeah,
right.
But you know a little bit now of what I was fighting with physically, and I couldn't. It was hard to swallow because of the throat condition, and the other part, that was a legitimate reason to not go in and eat.
Sure.
But I also was an introvert traveling on a 30-day trip with 10 people, and the Spear Sisters had just rejoined the group, and they were loud and funny, and sometimes I just want to go.
You knew you were going to get an hour to an hour and a half by yourself.
That's funny.
But I met your family, and something. Your dad just felt like an old friend from Hello, and so that became a trip that I would look forward to be around your family, and then I ended up going back out there because in Oregon there was no sales tax.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
So I would go out at Christmas time, and they got to where part of their family tradition, when he was still pretty young, was they would wait till I got there to go buy their tree.
That's funny.
Because Dave would get a bigger tree than what Dad would.
Yeah. Well, and in Oregon, that a live tree was about $1 a foot.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the house we grew up in was an old farmhouse, and I think we had probably 13-foot ceilings. Wow. So you knew we got a 12-foot tree when Dave came.
That's funny.
And his dad probably today even still would tell you he hates the song "Deck the Halls." So I would put that on a repeat.
Sure you would.
Loud, and get the biggest tree I could find.
That's funny.
And they had a little makeshift studio in your house, if I remember right.
Well, it wasn't really a studio. It was,
rehearsal.
we called it the rehearsal. We called it the music room.
Okay.
And we had carpet and egg crates
is what
on
I'm
the walls.
Yeah.
And that was where, even going back to the group that Mom and Dad had before, that was where rehearsals, where we had a piano in there. And we'd set up the PA system in there, and all through when the quartet, when they decided not to do with the group anymore. By then, my sister Angie and I, we'd come up and do 2 or 3 specials or songs with just Mom, Dad, and the 2 of us. And then, so when they decided to disband their group, Dad said, do y'all want to go ahead? And us, not knowing any better, said, yeah, sure. So Angie was 9 and I was 12.
And you started singing with your family.
We started singing. Angie would play piano. I learned to play bass. I played bass. Dad played guitar. And then we started playing with tracks as well. But we just go out and, like I said, we didn't know any better.
And that's also when that friendship began to cement even more, because I love family harmony.
Yeah, me too.
And it reminded me in so many levels of the way I grew up.
Yeah.
We sang as a family.
Yeah.
And so those are great memories. and one time I was out there, and back when I was at Benson at Great Circle, it was being from Michigan, I like a live tree. So I was out there and I found a Christmas tree. It was cheaper to ship it from Oregon, where he's from, Lebanon, Oregon, cheaper to ship it from Oregon to Great Circle than it was to buy one here.
No.
And his mom packed a bunch of greenery in it. And,
that's funny.
They called and said, Dave, you got a package down here at the dock. And
it's a Christmas tree. Okay, that's funny. From Oregon to Nashville. Okay.
Lebanon, Oregon. And that's just north of...
Nowhere. Lebanon was about 80 miles south of Portland. And then would
you go through Eugene, Salem, all that?
Yeah,
area?
well, actually, Salem, Eugene was south of us, about 45 minutes. So Lebanon was our address, but we were right in between the other town of Albany, which sits right off of Interstate 5.
Yep.
Right.
So
there's a TR truck stop used to be right at,
which is where that first meal took place, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
TNR,
So another thing about Albany, Don Cook, one of the greatest music writers in Christian music, he got married at the Assembly of God in Albany, Oregon.
Yep.
Wow.
And so he's like, "Will you come be in my wedding?" And I'm looking at it going, "That's right by, yeah, yep."
And I sang at the Albany Assembly of God Church.
Is that right?
Yvonne
Really?
is from, my wife is from St. Helens, Oregon, and dyed in the wool, went to college at the Assembly of God College, everything. I sang at nearly every Assembly of God church in Oregon.
Wow.
She didn't know that's where Don got married.
No, I had no
That's
idea.
Leslie's home church.
Eugene, Salem. That's true. Okay, that's
Beautiful, beautiful country out there.
Yes,
In the
it is.
summertime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be very depressing
Yes,
with the rain.
It
and
will
the
rain
snow.
about 5 months out of the year.
Yeah.
Oh, it was
One of the
just-
great ironies about that journey when they started singing as a family, I actually engineered their records.
Okay. Now that
Yes.
that comes around.
Yes.
Okay.
And in those days, there were some of them we would cut tracks in Nashville, and your dad would write the bulk of the record.
Yeah.
And we would cut tracks, and I would go. There used to be a studio called Sound Barrier out on Gallatin Road, and the guy that was the engineer there, named Chad, he's now the engineer for Gaithers. It's kind of a
I didn't know that.
so whenever you see Gaithers, a guy named Trey owned it, but Chad was the engineer. And in the basement,
Wow.
I'll take it a little further, in the basement of there, Woody Wright had an 8-track studio.
Wow.
If I remember that right.
Yeah.
And I would go down in the 8-track room.
That's right, because I remember seeing credits with Woody's name
Yeah.
on those credits when we get the product.
And Woody, is in the Gaither
Yep.
camp now.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Okay, that's fine.
and there's just a lot of
Yeah.
small
Yep.
things. But those were fun. And we'd go, there was a group called Knox
Knox
Brothers.
Brothers. Yep.
And they had a studio in, where was
That was in Harrisburg,
Harrisburg.
which was between us and Eugene.
And it was a nice studio, but it didn't have a bathroom. That's what I remember about it. But I remember as he's a little kid running around there, and watching him and the way he was watching, I said, "You got the temperament to be an engineer, audio engineer."
Really?
Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
Just-
That's been a long time ago, Dave.
Some of us haven't.
Better memory.
I remember.
But I do remember sitting and watching that whole process and sitting back and watching. And Mom and Dad, if they sit in and watch me if I do a session every now and then, they'll blame you for one of my, and you might have heard me say it, a phrase that you say, "Hey, one more for me."
Yep. I have heard you say that numerous times.
That was one that you used on us.
I've heard
Wow.
you say
And
that
I
a
don't
couple of
know-
times.
I probably still would.
Numerous for me, please. But
Yeah.
But the irony of that being the foundation of a friendship,
Yeah.
and now what you do, and I remember, it's been a while, but I do remember there was one week that I didn't call you and ask you to help me through a problem in my studio. There, he's like on speed dial. He knows when I'm recording because I'm going to call him and ask him something.
So, are you the one that brought him here, or did you just
How
decide
did
to
that
come?
play
here?
out?
indirectly, and I will say this too. I don't know if Mom and Dad have ever really forgiven you for this, but
Oh.
now through the Spears and Dave, I guess all music was always part of what we did.
Yeah.
You know, Dad's always said, "Man, looking back, I could probably be convicted of child abuse." You know, for going out, because there were times we would do 80 dates a year.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
part time.
yeah,
You know how it is. You leave Sunday morning or Saturday.
Yeah,
And now, Dad was. I'll get back to the story there, but Dad was a cattle buyer. So I grew up in auction yards.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there was a big sale on Saturdays that he had to be at. So there were times, depending. It was in Eugene, which was south of this. The auction yard was south. There were times we would, Mom Angie and I would get in the van with the trailer, drive down, pick him up at the auction yard, and continue on south. So we would be, if it was far enough away, You know, we didn't have to drive
Yeah.
real early and get up Sunday morning, do a Sunday morning, a Sunday night, and then get home late Sunday night or early Monday morning. And Dad had a humongous sale in Portland on Mondays. So he'd get up, we get up and go to school. And, you know,
That was just a part of it.
it was, yeah. So music was always something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed the performance part of it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know at what point. I knew I wanted to be involved. I didn't know at what point, whether they were singing or playing or engineering or whatever. So through the Spears, as we got older, you know, they had the Stamps Baxter School of Music.
Yeah. Okay.
And so as we got older, I went to that for 6 years. I think 1990 was the first year. So 90 and then 95. Wow. And towards the latter part, it was. We still got stuff out of it, but it was that looking forward to meeting people.
Friends.
Yeah. So through that school, we met some friends. Now, my sister moved here a year before I did, and her roommate was a friend we had met at the singing school who happened to work at New Day. So I graduated. I took 5 or 6 years to get through college. I had a good job and didn't know. So anyway, I finished up a 2-year degree. And thought, I guess it was February, I got an open-ended ticket. Said, I'm going to come. Angie, said, you can stay with us. Yeah. I said, I'm going to come and just see if there's job opportunities. Yeah. And one of the places was this lady who worked at New Day said they might have something available. So I went and sat down, interviewed.
Who'd you interview with?
Jerry Jr.
Oh.
And it was for a sales job.
Okay.
Now, and I hope this doesn't come across bad. But they said, Jerry said at that point, we don't have anything available in sales, but there's something in the warehouse. Yeah, and looking back on that, I'm glad, because if it was in sales, I probably wouldn't have made it. Now, I had a degree. My degree was marketing. Yeah. But I'm not a sales.
We interviewed Wayne Hahn a while back, and Wayne told a story, I think, of him walking through the warehouse one day.
Yeah, I listened to that podcast, and honestly, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I remember him, though, saying that they would like for me to, he wanted to know if I would be interested in working in publishing.
Wayne was very kind about all that.
Yeah, and he said
he knew it. He knew you'd be a great.
Does anybody here want to learn to be an engineer or something like that? And you went,
yeah. I said, why not?
Yeah.
Because in my remembrance of that was he were looking for somebody to help out with the publishing department.
Yeah.
In the story, he had said, when I said, he said, okay, we'll start off as part-time.
Yeah.
And I think that was on a Thursday or Friday. Monday, I pulled into the parking lot and was getting ready to go in the warehouse to do, and then I was going to go spend the rest of the day with him in publishing. So I walk in, he was walking in, he said, you're with me all day. And they had made a change. He was going to be A&R.
Yeah.
So things got sped up. And so I went and worked with him. And then we had that he mentioned the little studio. And I've listened, what he didn't tell you was the studio was a little closet, which is upstairs.
Yep, I know. Yep.
And they had a little window. They had they had a keyboard, one 8-app machine, and one 8-track. And he said, "Here, you can learn this."
So, did anybody teach you? I mean, how did they didn't have anybody, and somebody was going to learn it, right?
Yeah. I knew enough being around it, watching you, to know how the process, which that ought to scare everybody.
Say that last line one more time.
I think I just had about 3 cancellations come up. But knowing the process, and I knew if the audio hit red, that wasn't good. And so I learned how to punch. It's you at that time with ADATs, it was destructive, and so you punch on a downbeat.
Yeah.
And you don't punch in the middle of a phrase, you punch at the down over word, or you find somewhere to punch. And it was just trial and error. And I was, as part of what would do then with Wayne, he was start producing a lot. So I would go, if he had a tracking session or something, I'd go hang out with the studio. At that time, they used Upfront Studios, which was down off of 8th Avenue at Wedgwood.
Yeah.
Terry Thompson and Kevin Williams owned that studio. And I just go hang out and watch and learn. And then there were some mix times. Kevin Ward did a lot of mixing for us. And if there were mixes, I'd go hang out while he was mixing, just sit and listen and watch and ask questions. And both of those guys in the early days were good. If I had questions, you know, I'd ask. And a lot of it was going and watching and then going back to the demo studio and putting it to practice. I'm a hands-on learner. You know, if you sit there and tell me something, I can retain it, but until I sit and actually do it, that's when it starts to register with me.
But again, you'd grown up around the music, and you'd been a fan, you'd been a student, you knew what musically was right.
Correct.
And what most people don't realize, and I don't know if you know this, Dusty, but what a stinking good bass player he is.
I did not know that. I'd heard that he was, but I didn't know it. I mean, I haven't.
Within reason, you know, I enjoy playing. I play at church on Sundays.
I knew that,
And, you know, there's times I think, this feels good, until I go and I'm sitting on the other side of the glass, and you've got Craig Nelson, Gary Lunn, Jacob Lowry, and saying, all right, I'm going to put it down because there's a different level.
But yes, there is. But you have been in all of those roles. Each piece of that prepared you to become a better audio engineer. And you know, I mentioned your dad being a writer. Probably the biggest cut your dad had was on J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, and it's still one of my favorite songs, called "No Less Than Me." And his dad. Have you met his parents?
No.
We need to make that happen.
Okay.
So one time I was out there, and she said his dad was a cattle buyer.
Which just intrigues me so much.
He took me to a cattle auction with him. And his dad is like the quietest, even if you're sitting right next to him, you're talking to me, you know, he's real quiet. And so I go to this auction, which is, in my mind, going to be I'd never been to one. And if we got cattle people listening to this, you'll appreciate the moment. But we're sitting in like what you think a country singer is going to come out. I mean, it's that kind of a arena seat, small auditorium. And they would bring a cow out. I think it was a cow. I eat a lot of McDonald's, but that's the extent of my knowledge. And they'd bring a cow, and his dad would lean over and go, "That'll go for." He would tell me how much it would weigh and what it would go for before the cow got onto the scales.
Wow.
And here's this guy that always was quiet, and you go, I knew he had to be good at it. But that day, I mean, I left, I smelled like I'd been to a cattle auction, but it was one of the most fascinating things.
And so he'd buy cows there?
People would give him orders, is that right?
He would order buyers. So he had, I don't know, 3 or 4, guys, or somebody would say, even the small, back then you had the smaller farms. And that was the area that I grew up in, were small farms, agriculture. So he would have a guy that said, "Hey, I want 5 head of cattle. I want some calves in the 3 to 400 range. I don't want to spend over this much." And he might have 3 or 4. And then he also had one client who would say, "I'll take as much as you can get."
Wow.
So he'd go in and fill those orders, and
different world.
Totally different world.
Yeah.
I remember going, in the summertime growing up. I mentioned the Portland livestock. That at the time, that was a humongous one. It would start, I think, at 9 or 10 in the morning. They'd take a lunch break, and it might not be done until 6 o'clock. But he would, for the big orders that he would order a semi. So you had trucks that would, so he'd get one truck booked, and you could get, if I remember right, 80,000 pounds on a trailer, on a truck. So as the day progressed, he would go and look back and see how many more cattle were there, what might work for him. And then he'd send me down to the office, say, "How much weight do I have?" And then he would determine if he stayed and ordered another truck, or if when that truck was full, then he was done for the day.
And if I remember right, he was one of the few buyers at that auction that didn't need a credit approval. I mean, they took him. They knew he was good.
They knew he was good for that. And,
man,
yeah, it always intrigued. Looking back, one thing that I was impressed about Dad, and I knew he always had a great reputation and all that, but this big client that he had, I remember the guy gave him his checkbook. He had a checkbook.
That's right.
And trusted Dad to write that. He would take that in to the auction and write the check for all the cattle right there. But yeah, he had a great reputation with everybody, and
it's so interesting to hear him talk about this, because I grew up in southern Idaho. I know exactly what you're talking about when they're all sitting around and here comes the cow, because I seen all that. I seen Wagner's trucking, that they would go out to the cattle places, but here it probably happens here. We just don't ever hear about it like this.
There's an auction on Mondays, Cross Plains.
Yeah, see, that would not surprise me.
And how did you know that? Is that kind of always on your radar growing up that way?
When Dad kind of knew some stuff, when they lived here for a year or two, and then, but he was always looking. I think when he was here, we realized that there was a cattle auction up there at Cross Plains on Mondays.
Lebanon had one. I can see that, Lebanon, Cross Plains. Yep. Nothing against you fine folks that live out there.
But, it has nothing to do with your studio experience. It's just, that was the family I fell in love with.
Yeah.
And they became our extended family. When your sister moved here, you both were like in and out of our house, because that was a second family to you guys. Yeah.
Wow.
And you may not know this story. His sister Angie, and you said everybody loves Justin. She's the only one I've ever heard say something bad about him. But the house we're in, when we built it 30 years ago, she was here, and she had kind of, was hanging out here all the time. She wanted to buy us a housewarming gift. And, we didn't want it. She didn't have, much money, or I assume, I don't know. But we knew we needed to let her do that.
Yeah.
And so she bought us a gift card to like Lowe's for $25 or $50. And we went back and forth. Now, what do we do with that? Because we wanted it to be significant.
Something special, yeah.
And it dawned on us to buy a tree.
Oh, for your yard.
For right at the end of our driveway, we planted this Bradford pear, and our kids grew up calling that the Angie tree.
That's funny.
And
That's
that
sweet.
Angie tree got hit by lightning. It wouldn't die. It kept getting bigger. We trimmed it. It kept growing. We finally, just 3 months ago, when you go out, you'll see where they took the stump out. That was just all that time that Angie tree has been at our house. So all that to say. And Justin got married how many years ago?
This year will be, what year is it?
You better get this
26
right.
years.
Okay.
And your best man was?
Sitting across the table from me.
And when his sister got married, my wife Cindy was her maid of honor. So this is not just an engineer that we work with.
Yeah.
Now, let's fast forward to the music again. Let's get back to that. When I talked about you being a great bass player that a lot of the people you don't work with, but that gives you a foundation to mix from. You always know to turn the bass up a little louder.
Absolutely. That's one of the first things. I've kind of learned to compensate, but bass is always seems to be a little heavy on some mixes sometimes.
But he also, you may not know this, Dusty, but he also sings. So
I don't know if I knew that. Okay, man.
So tell me the story. It was at Mike Bowling. And how did you end up out in the room?
Man, I don't know about that. So years ago, Mike Bowling did the Remembering Kenny Henson project.
We still sell a bunch of it, believe it or not.
And that project was him and I sitting in the room working.
Wow.
And when we come back in and listen back, instinctively, I'd start humming bass line. It's just something. And he heard it and decided, you know what, we need a bass singer. Why don't you go do it?
And so you're on.
So
he's singing.
It's not mixed
record.
Very loud, but the bass vocal on that Remember Kenny Henson is.
We still sell
it.
Again, those engineers, they sit and listen. They work with producers. They become trusted.
Oh yeah.
So what was the first big record that you remember working on by yourself? Besides my project.
Besides yours. Well, yeah, that's a given. Well, the very, very first project I ever worked on was there was a group that they had signed called the Livingstons.
Oh,
Denny Livingston.
I love that record.
I think it was called "I've Got a Story to Sort of Tell."
I know the record.
And
That'd be a good podcast.
they and I don't remember. I remember Wayne calling me at home, and it might have been a Sunday or something. Said, "Hey, Livingstons are coming in on Sunday evening, wanting to create a song. Can you come engineer?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah, sure." So, and by then we had moved out of the little demo room into a little bigger space, and we did stuff there. And that was the first label thing I think that I worked on. And at that time we had the Steels. I think the first thing I worked on with them was an album called "It's by Love."
Okay.
And there was, I can't remember what songs were on that. It all kind of rolls together. And then the Perrys, I started working. I don't think I worked on that. I know I didn't work on the Crossings album, the first album, but it might have been the second album. I worked with the Perrys for a number of years in there. Cumberland Quartet. We did a lot of stuff there. And it just kind of grew from that. And I don't know, trying to think.
Watching that journey, your confidence grew, and the relationship with the people that everybody loves coming in there.
They do. They do. They love Justin.
But you learned to engineer at one of the most difficult times, and let me explain that. The old school, they used to do it on 2-inch tape.
Yeah.
You know, and you'd have to punch in and out. And now everything is digital.
Yeah.
But in between those two, we went through, like, was it Radar?
Radar was the first digital hard disk. ADAT was still tape based, but it was different from the reel-to-reel stuff because you couldn't do the splicing, you couldn't do the editing. It was digital, recorded it digitally, but onto a magnetic.
So you've had to learn the process like 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah. Well, now see, when I started, this is one thing I wish I could have, but then thinking about it, I'm glad I didn't. I never worked on 2-inch or on tape, reel to reel. My first.
You're blessed.
Well, like I said, I kind of feel like I missed something, but then I'm kind of glad I didn't. But ADATs were what we started with, and it looked like, for those who don't know, it looks like a VHS player. And those who don't know that, anyway. But you could record 8 tracks, 8 channels per tape, and you could link those machines together.
So it was the first time we had unlimited tracks, so you could keep adding and adding. If you could afford another machine, and they were what, like $3,000 a piece,
something or something like that. Yeah, and we had I think we had 4. I know we had at least 3 machines. Yeah, I think we just had 3 machines.
And I had 3 here at the house, and nobody liked them.
No,
but
they sounded good, but there was a lot of.
And didn't I, like last year? Didn't I? He was going through the closet getting rid of some stuff and had one sitting around. He said, "I'm going to put this on the road." I said, "Does it work?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'll take it," because we've got so many projects that are on ADAT, and I still to this day, I've got an ADAT set up where I can transfer from ADATs into Pro Tools. And not that I want to do it a lot, but
do you have reel to reel? Do you do reel to reel?
I do not have.
Because you're old. Do you have reel to reel?
Yes, everybody my age and a little bit older has the garage is full of those 2-inch.
Oh, I've seen them all. Yes.
Yep.
But yeah, the engineers, what they hated about the ADAT was, yes, you could link them all together, but you'd have to wait for them to lock up. So where you punch somebody in digitally,
everything's
it's
automatic.
There.
Wow.
And I've seen more engineers lose their temper. Waiting for those things.
That's so funny.
Jason Webb said, they called it syncing, getting them to sync together. Jason Webb said a long time ago, the best way to get 3 ADATs to sync together is to throw them off the boat at the same time. We were in a situation years ago. We did a live thing. We had a good friend of ours, Keith Seeley, who did a lot of engineering with you. So we went up to a big church in Cincinnati doing a live project. So Keith was the main engineer. I was along just for moral support and to help. So Sunday night, humongous church full of people, and we're in the back corner, and I was on comms talking to the front. We get time, the pastor says, welcome, here we go, here the choir. Keith goes to hit record, and 4 machines sat there and just blinked at you. And they didn't sync. And the only way to start was to shut everything down and restart again. And in my ears, I'm saying, are we ready? I'm like, hold on.
Oh, my God.
And it was nerve-wracking. It felt like it was a half hour. It might have been 3 minutes.
Yeah,
but in those situations, but we'd have those in the studio as well where you'd go to hit play and one machine would run, but the others wouldn't sync up. Or you see them, you get going and you see them thinking and hope that they're in sync in time by the time you got to punch in. So they created a lot of twitches. And
I wonder why you twitch every now and then.
So on that note, there's a rumor that I've never been able to substantiate.
And I know where you're going, and I to this day do not remember.
Oh, I'm anxious to hear this.
But go ahead.
There's a rumor that one time in 30 years, he lost his temper in a session. And the rumor is he threw something at a file cabinet and put a dent in it. That's the story I heard.
And I honestly, to this day, do not remember that.
I can't
I'm not saying it didn't happen,
him getting mad at anybody.
That's funny.
Yes.
Just in about every 10 years, I'll say, hey, is that true? Is that...
That's good that you just don't
If I knew it, I'd own up to it. But I honestly, I do not remember that, which might be a good thing.
Yeah, that is a very
But
good thing.
I've watched you, and like I said, if people read credits, it's staggering the amount of... And is it right that you have engineered yourself over 50 #1 songs?
I think I went back and looked at, yes. Wow. I think it was...
Now think about that.
That's pretty incredible.
So
been involved in some way in over 50.
And you've probably
that went #1 in spite of you.
Yeah, I know. I was like, man, just think of what could have happened.
And you've probably
if I
worked with the majority of the producers in Southern gospel music when you think about it.
You know,
I mean,
honestly, you know, when you think back on that.
I mean, I've seen you with Trey Ivy. I've seen you with Wayne. I've seen you with Marty. I've seen you with Dave. I mean, going back through all the different
3 of the 4 of those you've learned something.
True, Dad. But I mean, and there's multiple other ones. I mean, when I think back, probably Bubba Smith.
We did a lot of albums with Bubba. Woody, you mentioned Woody Wright.
Yeah,
I worked on a couple project with Woody Wright.
Wow.
He did we did a Kenny Bishop. Album.
That's right. That's right.
What did you work on with Bubba? Who were the artists?
He was at Daywind, so he probably did.
It was Karen. Yep, Karen Peck, and then there was a duo, the McRae sisters.
McRae's, and then he probably did do Austin's Bridge.
Yeah, he did Austin's Bridge as well.
So he did, and of course to me, Bubba is always known as Grammy Award winner for Shirley Caesar for numerous projects. Bruce Carroll.
I learned a lot from Bubba too on just the other side of things.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I've tried all the producers in some way. You know, I don't produce. I don't want to do that kind of thing. But you learn to work with different guys.
Yeah.
And you know, Wayne Hahn's a different producer than Bubba is.
You're exactly
and
right.
I'm not, you know, and they're both absolutely fantastic, but they approach things differently.
And you know this, he was just the same. He's just so consistent as he's with the different people.
So when you say you're not a producer, but when I'm in the room and you're setting up for brass, what do?
You go get lunch.
I go get
That's
brass players are so good, and they just it's like just do this.
And that scares me to death.
But you do it
well, and this is the part that scares. I guess I've learned how to fake my way through stuff because one of my
we all I should say
right here
everybody
right here
has learned how to do it. One of my shortcomings that I wish, looking back, I wish I would have done more was study music and theory. I can tell you when something doesn't sound right. My ears. But don't ask me to tell you what it is. Or how it's done.
I get that.
I know a little bit of theory, but especially you mentioned the orchestra sessions. I can follow along on a score. I can tell you, I can read bars and beats. I can read the how the note equation. But if there's somebody in the room says, "Hey, is that supposed to be a E instead of an F?"
That's not your job anyway, though.
No,
But
it's
ends up
not.
at your-
But there's part of me that says, "I wish I knew."
Yeah.
But you know what? Of all the engineers I've worked with in town, I only know one who was a actual note reader, and people listening, that's probably would surprise them.
That
Because
actually
you,
kind of.
you trust your instincts, you trust your ear, and you got to be able to follow a chart.
Yeah.
And Bob Clark talked about on his interview about the locator numbers and how no one had ever used a certain spot.
Yeah.
And man, the thing. I want to work with an engineer enough where they know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But if I say, bring them in here, there's no hesitation. You know exactly where that spot is, and that doesn't require music reading.
No, it requires, I think, some knowledge, though. There again, if you say, I went in on beat 3 of bar 45, I need to know how to count.
Yeah.
Which
And
is
are you working on that? Is that?
it's, I guess half the time, I don't know. I have to say I can't count past 8. So,
I love it.
But that's, and then instinctively knowing too, there's sometimes knowing if you're going along and thinking, okay, I've lost count, but I still know where that's at. Knowing where the music's going and saying, okay, it's at this
All right,
spot.
give us some of your. Man, this was really cool. What I got to do, 'cause I know some of these, but I'd love to hear your list.
Well, one was, it goes back to getting to do a Larnell vocal.
Yeah.
That was
That's a record line. Okay,
yeah,
great.
which I knew this is kind of, I was setting you up for this, so go ahead and we'll get it out of the way.
I mean, Larnell, one of the greatest vocalists ever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Larnell comes in, and I don't even remember what we were working on. But
It was the what was the song that y'all wrote? It was a single that Nick and him wrote. Or was it that, or was it actually? No, it was a Christmas musical that you wrote that he come in and sung on.
Okay, so it was a Littleness.
Yes, it was a Littleness
called All Year Long, which was one of his songs.
Yeah.
So it was just the three of us in the studio. And between break, Larnell says, and like you say, world class, one of the best singers ever.
Absolutely.
Larnell says, "Hey, you got any warm water here?" And Justin goes, "Yeah, he says, "You got a Keurig or something?"
Yeah, we had a Keurig.
So I can warm some water up. And he goes, "Yeah, that's right, that's right, that's right." So he and I are in the control room. Larnell walks back in with his cup of water, and he said, "I've got a Keurig at home." He said, "I was wondering, what do you use to clean yours?" And Justin goes, "I never clean it." And he spit the water out. It was one of the funniest.
Is funny.
It has been cleaned since then, but maybe once.
That's Justin. That is Justin all the way.
And it wasn't like he was, he was half being funny, but
Right. That
but
is
just
so
the three of us in there, and there were other moments. I remember Jimmy Fortune. I think it was January of 2018.
Something like that, yeah.
I had heard something on the news, and I called Jimmy and I said, "Hey, you want to write this?" And he said, "I got to leave tomorrow," and I said, "Well, I got to work today. Let's write tonight." So we wrote it that night, and I called Justin. I said, We've got to get, before Jimmy leaves town, we've got to get a guitar vocal. And you had a full day already booked.
Yeah, I think there was something, we were able to shuffle things around to get him in.
You said, "Can you be here early?" Mm-hmm. So Jimmy and I went early in the morning. And I mean, that you were a fan of.
Well, yeah, and that goes back to something that I thought about, that a lot of my early remembrances were of music.
Yeah.
And my first remembrance of Jimmy was, you get this, mowing the yard at the farm and having headphones on, listening to the radio, and hearing Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And going, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So we fast forward to that, when he sits down and starts playing and starts singing, and I had goosebumps.
Yeah.
And it was kind of one of those, I've had some of those moments of, how in the world did I get here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sitting in, the Oak Ridge Boys is another one.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to get to record them a few times.
Did you do Joe Bonzo's last
I
session?
think I recorded the last vocal that Joe Bonzo ever sung on.
Yeah.
And which is a funny story. That another one of those "how in the world did I get here" moments. So they come in, they were all standing around. They record it in the evenings because they'll come in on Wednesday, record, and then go get on the bus.
Yeah.
So we're sitting around talking, and Jerry Salley was producing this. So Joe was sitting in the chair. I was standing behind him.
Yeah.
And Joe was sitting in the chair, and everybody's around. And he gets a call, and he looks down, and he mutes it, and he said, "That was Johnny Bench. I'll call him back." I was going, everybody's like, "Call him back." Yeah. So he FaceTimes Johnny Bench. And for those of you who don't, I'm a humongous baseball fan.
And Cincinnati Reds.
Well, Dodgers, but
back in that day, you followed those guys.
Yeah, those were those guys.
Yeah.
Which, ironically, you took me to my first baseball game. Was a Cincinnati Reds game in Riverfront. So Joe calls him back on FaceTime, and I'm standing over Joe's shoulder, looking at Johnny Bench on FaceTime, going,
"Unbelievable! Oh yeah!"
What? And I look at Jerry Salley, and I'm going,
"Yeah."
And Jerry's a big Ohio guy too.
Yeah, I was like, "How in the world? What am I doing?"
Yeah.
But it was kind of getting to work with those guys because, again, one of my first remembrances of music was going to see the Oak Ridge Boys at the Oregon State Fair when Elvira had just hit.
Okay, you're not going to believe there. B.J. Thomas was there too.
Was he?
I was there.
No. Okay, so verify with me if I remember this right.
Okay, this is so funny.
They hit Elvira. I don't remember the rest of the set. They hit Elvira, and people rushed the stage.
That you're exactly right.
And it was at that moment. I mean, I'm kind of getting chills thinking about it now.
Because you also had some people leave, some Christian people, because they had not. I remember in the back they'd walked out, but I remember. Listen,
we stayed, so I don't know what that says about us.
I can remember the crowd. Because I knew him as a gospel group.
Yeah.
When Elvira, I promise you, I was there at in Eugene, or Salem, Oregon.
So wow, that's fun. Because that's one of my early remembrances. And then I remember thinking that music influences people when they got up and rushed. It was like, okay, there's something to this. Yeah. And then getting to work with them these years later.
You've done, I think, over 20 of Karen Peck's number one. You've been in
everything that she did when she came to Daywind. I've been a part of,
and she's had numerous.
She's over artist with the most or 21
Southern Gospel number ones.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
I love those kind of stories. And,
yes.
There are other things that
I want to know which artists you don't like to work with. No, I'm just joking.
Chuck Wagon Gang. You got to work on that, and again,
that was a cool moment because I remember my grandfather, my dad's dad, had Chuck Wagon Gang records and listened. They still sound the same, and it was cool. It's one of those. It's like, I wish they would be around to know this, but we would go to bed. You mentioned the Oak Ridge Boys. I knew them as gospel stuff too. Got their gospel stuff. Yeah. We would. We had the big old farmhouse before we got old enough to move upstairs. We had our bedroom, a big living room, and then my parents' bedroom. So the stereo sat in that room in between, and we go to bed we put 2 LPs on that and hear it drop. But we go to bed listening to the Chuck Wagon Gang or the Oak Ridge Boys or the Good Ones. Or Buck Owens or Waylon Jennings or Johnny Cash. It was such an eclectic thing, but that was what I grew up with. Going back to the auction days, Dad had a old farm truck. I think it was a late 60s Model Ford cab over farm truck, had a cattle bed on the back of it. And we go down the road, had an old cassette player on that, and listened to cassettes. The one that I remember a lot was that Oak Ridge Boys Live that had I Know on it and King James. Go and listen to that going down the road. So all that coming around to saying again, getting to work with those artists. And even the artists that weren't that old, growing up, Brian Free. I remember hearing Brian Free with Gold City and then working with them for, I think, 15 or 16 years now.
I think that's one of the things that I love about our podcast. I mean, I love lots of stuff. We still get, starstruck's probably the wrong word, but I think
fans.
Still fans.
Yeah.
Saturday we had Phil Johnson in
Yeah.
here, watching Cindy, Dave's wife, watching Dave, and ask him how I was, and these are people we worked with before, but just getting to hear them tell the stories.
Yeah.
That's when I look at somebody like you and I think, no wonder you're so successful. About 30 years at one company is pretty amazing to me as an
in
engineer.
a town where there are very few engineers that are
stabilized. They go from place to
Yeah.
place to place, and yet you have stayed. And because I'd watched you just now, you still love the music.
Yeah.
You still love the music.
And he grew up with an appreciation for great songs.
Exactly right.
And so a lot of times we'll ask people, did you know when, and I would ask you that when you've heard some Rodney Griffin song that, did you know that was going to be as big a song as it was? Do you have instincts about that as you hear them?
I don't know, because honestly, a lot of times when you're in that process, you read the lyrics, but it doesn't really register because I'm also listening to how's the vocal sound.
Yeah.
And trying to put it all together.
Yeah. And is this, or a lot of times when we record, we'll do one vocal at a time. So you don't hear the final.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the song, a song varies.
Yeah.
The recording process varies depending on the artist. It doesn't mean they're harder to work with. It's just the way you work. Yeah. Some artists will get a song in 2 hours. Other artists, it's 6 hours.
Yeah.
And it's just the process. Yeah. And so honestly, by the end of you finish a song after 6 hours, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. And that's a cruel thing to say. I guess a cruel way to say that. Yeah. But even with an album,
any specific artist you don't want to hear it.
No.
Okay, that's I could think.
And this sounds bad, and I hope if artists listen to that, I hope they take this the right way. But when I'm done with it, it might be a year till it's done before I'll go back and listen to it because you spent so much time. And there are some things I am anxious to hear the final project when it's done mixing. I want to hear the final. I want to hear how it turns out. So there's every now and then there's a song, a lyric that you hear and it goes by and you think, I like that, but then you go on to the next thing, and you're so thinking on what else is going on that
And we did the entire new Chosen Road record.
Yeah,
with you. You did every note of that.
Yeah,
until they left Nashville.
The mix. Yeah,
and that was probably a little bit different for you being there, start to finish, where you got to hang with the guys and your boys came down one night and just the stories and laughing, and
that was probably one of the in a way, hours wise, it was one of the longest weeks that we'd worked for a while.
That's because Dave was producing.
Well, he had.
No, I'm just kidding. I love Chosen Road. He knows that.
Somebody's got to push those boys.
Poor Jonathan and Zach.
But it was one of the. There's times. And that after you work 12, 14-hour days, sometimes that third day or that fourth day, you're just wiped and tired.
Yeah, we do.
But we got through that Friday. We worked Monday to Friday. I think we ended at midnight or so Friday night. And for me, it was a first session, I think, that we'd worked that long. And I was surprised that I hadn't felt that wired down. Yeah. Until I got home and sat down in the chair that night and just went.
And the other thing about Chosen Road, for most listeners who don't know this, a normal day in the studio starts at 10 in the morning. You go, well, that's kind of late to start. Yeah. But when you may work till midnight, 10 is Chosen Road, you work till midnight, and we were back there at 9 in the morning in red. I mean, we were recording.
Yeah, you were tracking.
I think so cool about all that is I remember after you guys finished that record, it was a couple of weeks later, we all got to sit down and listen. And you were there. You set the room up. That's where I think the magic, it just is hearing how this great producer, great songwriter, engineer, and all of a sudden you're in a room full of people with the artists, I think they were on the phone, if I remember right. I don't remember
Yeah,
them being there.
They were.
Oh,
They
it
were
was
Jonathan,
in.
I think, was
Jonathan
there.
Buckner was there.
Yeah, Jonathan was there,
but
but the other guy,
everybody else,
Zach, and them were.
yeah, they were.
But just watching,
And they wanted to see what the reaction of the
and
listening
it was, to me, I'm a huge fan of theirs anyway, but listening to it and then knowing where, especially after conversations like this, knowing all the stuff that you all, because I get to go in and help do my little thing that I do, but I don't stay there the whole time, you know. It's so, I think that's so cool.
And that's the fun process, though. I think with the artists that come in, you know, you don't see them like with, you know, most of them.
Yeah.
You see them here and there,
Yeah.
but they come in and you end up spending so much time in the room.
Yeah.
And it's not like, you know, we're constantly calling and talking, but when they show up,
Yeah.
it's like you're working with people that you enjoy working with.
Well, we had that happen just a couple of weeks ago with that patriotic song. It was one of my cool moments, you know, because you don't, nowadays, a lot of times it's just the artist comes in, but we had like 8 or 9 artists in the room, and the camaraderie and watching you go around and get them all set up, and then just watching them all sit there and visit. They'd go in and sit with you while you were doing it's very cool. That's one of the magical parts of what we get to do.
That room has become a go-to room.
Absolutely, where he sits behind, seeing that leather sofa behind it, and people going there and sitting there watching. It's very cool.
So any we'll wind this up fairly quick here, but any stories of artists that you learned something you didn't expect, or you things that you picked up from them that you didn't know that was going to be part of it? Any stories like that you can share?
Yeah, I got to go through the filter.
Oh, don't. I'm just kidding. Kind of.
I think every time, well, I'll go back and preface it and say that I think it's a constant learning process. I've always thought, if I feel like I know everything, it's time for me to pack it up and go do something else.
I love that.
Then you become a producer.
And then I become, But, you know, I think you learn, like we go back to when I learned stuff from the producers on how you approach things. Yeah. And some of that is on how you approach with the people on the other side of the glass. Is I've always felt that that's the harder job than what I do.
Yeah.
And my job at that point, one, is to capture the audio, but I also want to make sure they're comfortable.
And I've always appreciated you about that. I'm watching you with that.
Yeah, I thought, if they're not comfortable, we're not going to get the best vocal, or we're not going to get the best performance from them. And so I want to try my best to make sure that they're comfortable.
Yeah.
But the engineer is not only reading the person in the room, you're trying to read the producer's mind.
Yes.
And what are they going to want?
Yeah, and I try to stay. And that's I've always try to stay. And the producers that I worked with a lot, I know where they're going.
Usually lunch.
Yes, I did. But Wayne, there was Wayne and I worked together. If Wayne was the one that brought me in and offered me the opportunity to do this, and so we worked together so many years, so many hours, that I can't remember, it was some time ago, and it might have been that Dottie was sitting in. She would come and sit in.
She used to have me bring her over all the time.
Dottie Leonard.
Dottie Leonard, who
company.
owned the company. And I don't remember if it was her or something said something about us communicating, and they said, they just got to grunt at each other. They know what to do. Yeah. But it was knowing, when I'm not doing something, I'm trying to listen to what the producer's saying to the artist to anticipate, okay, this is where we're going. This is what we're after. And be ready for that.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I've always been, I don't want to be the reason that a session is held up. And if there's something goes, I'll try to get it figured out, but I never want to be the reason that something's not happening.
And sometimes technology is the reason.
Exactly right.
And that's where you get a little nervous too. It's like you start troubleshooting and what you're trying isn't working. We had that 2 or 3 weeks ago. we set the room up like I always do. It was a tracking session,
Yeah.
and there were 2 mics on the drums that would not work. And they worked perfect. And I tracked things down, and we finally found a workaround that made it. But it was one of those
at that point you got to become a repairman too. I mean,
right.
There back at Great Circle there was Bob Clark, and then Dave Murphy, and David. You'd get there early or stay late, and David had his solder and iron fixing. You develop a sense for how to repair what's broken too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's that's like I said, it's a troubleshooting thing.
And Dusty, you may not know this, but on the new Tim McGraw single, if you look at engineering credit,
is it right there? Okay.
It's that Bob Minner project.
Well, I saw pictures of it, so that's amazing.
It was kind of that was kind of one of the and I don't ever want to it's
it's okay though.
It is. I know I still get.
I was sitting a few years ago at the Absolutely Gospel Awards.
Yeah.
And they're going through the categories, and I'm not a big award guy, and I think we're sitting
together in the back of the room,
just having our ongoing commentary.
He won.
He won Engineer of the Year.
That's exactly right.
Okay, that's pretty cool, and his family's not there to see it. I'm going to take pictures.
I do. That was a very cool moment.
Yeah,
very cool moment.
This has been great. Sometimes we'll give artists, sometimes we get songwriters, sometimes musicians.
Yeah.
But we try to share stories of all the different facets of the industry. I got one more question before we go.
All right.
Here it goes.
This is the one that I've been worried about all day.
I might have one afterwards.
So there's a rumor.
Here,
of course,
I love how he sets it up. Dave?
The rumor is, we've talked a lot about Karen Peck. Mm-hmm. And Karen is another one that we love like family at our house.
Absolutely.
She's been very kind.
Yeah.
The conversations she and I have had have led to great moments that she's recorded and you'll tell me later about what was going on in the room but when we first wrote together, Rick Shelton wanted me and Karen and Michael Farron to try writing together. Well, Karen and I had met years ago, but we didn't know each other, and we were going to write. In fact, we ended up writing that morning a song called "Pray Now."
It's a great song.
And that was the first time the three of us had been in the room.
I love this. Is some of the stuff that I love because I didn't know this. I thought they'd just written together for years.
I think that ended up.
It was a number one song.
Yeah, it was number one song.
It was the name of the album title.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty amazing moment that came out of a real conversation.
It was a T-shirt because she even gave me a T-shirt that said "Pray Now."
I've gotten to where I only wear T-shirts now that people have my titles on, but
that would not surprise me at all. Folks, go to tell the story and buy merch.
The rumor is the night before Karen and Michael and I were going to write that you were working with Karen.
Yes.
And there was a conversation.
She mentioned that she was writing. I don't know how it come up, but she mentioned that she was writing with you the next day, and she wasn't sure how to go. She said a little nervous, and I told her, I said, "Take him in with a box of Twinkies. He'll be your friend forever."
Okay, so did she bring you a box of Twinkies?
I think she did. I think it was Twinkies, but I think she took him as some Twinkies.
That's funny.
Pray now.
Pray now.
Over a box of Twinkies.
And Dusty, this is why
we love to tell the stories.
Justin, this has been fun. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
I love Justin's heart and spirit, and just this opens my eyes to stuff about him too.
That's just
which
great.
I know. That's great, Justin. We adore you and just so proud of you. So
it's humbling to think that I've got to be a part of so much stuff. And,
you have,
and just be a little part of stuff that people do, I guess, and there's times I feel inadequate about being able to do it. But
I want to end it with this. Last week was his 30th anniversary, and it was so cool. Cindy at the office sends out a little email and says, 30 years for... And people will reply to some of them, but it was so cool to see the people all replying about Justin on this long... And I remember seeing Ed's and several other people's that I thought, that's just really cool. And you're very loved, very loved.